welcome. It's been a year. I can't believe that we
Yeah,
spoke last, right? Because it was the very first interview I did, actually, via Zoom. I think was the
I,
very
I, I,
first one.
I'm very proud to have been the first one in your day. I mean, in your year,
Yes,
first year.
in the
Good.
history of the UN brief, we inaugurated on the 3rd of May
Yeah, yeah.
of 2020 because I thought we should mark the International Press Freedom Day, World Press Freedom
Freedom
Day.
Day, exactly.
And this year you had a very good celebration over a couple of days, starting on the 29th of April until the 3rd, with the actual day, with several speakers, internet luminaries were talking about the main issues. And this year the topic and the theme was information as a public good.
Yeah, that's. I mean, it's of course it's a very important topic, and I think the theme and the choice of the theme is what was important in the sense that uh, if we consider that information and free and independent media are really key for democracy, that means that really it should become one of this notion of the common good. I mean, we need to create the conditions, let's say, to make this really shared by everybody, and so that everybody can get access to quality information, quality journalism. And I think that's why it is critical, let's say, to focus this World Press Freedom Day or World Press Freedom Conference on this idea, on the different component, let's say, of free and independent journalism, considering all the aspects which are necessary to make press and media viable, because the viability of media is critical. And we have learned also from history that if there is no I would say, if there is no viability, there is no press. If there is no capacity, let's say, really to practice good journalism, there is no quality journalism. And that's why it is important to think in terms of what are the mechanisms which are needed or which are really useful for creating this free and independent media and press ecosystem, nationally and globally.
So what is next now? What are some of the programs that UNESCO is working on in order to support this impulse, this move towards making sure that journalism, information as a public good becomes a reality? Are there programs, are there goals in place in terms of supporting journalism?
There are always different goals and different, let's say, lines of activities. And let me just maybe comment on two or three. One is a work which is ongoing with the different platforms. I mean, we have seen in the last years how important, and this during the pandemics, how important is the information coming through the different platforms. And not only social media, but also the platforms, Google, for example, as a relay of the different media outlets. And the transparency and the mechanisms by which these platforms are functioning and the way they can or they should contribute also to this to the quality of information is important. So UNESCO is engaged with them. It's not an easy conversation, but UNESCO is engaged in and is trying to bring, let's say, around the table these major actors of the information society, so that they can also take their share and be as responsible as possible in these mechanisms. That's one line of action. And another line of action we are working on is, of course, to continue to work on press freedom as part of one of the components of the human rights. It is, I mean, we have always to remember that this, the Article 19 of the Human Rights Declaration, which is really at the center of this notion of press freedom, and also very often we forget to mention the access to information, which is it is the freedom to speak, but it is also the freedom and the importance to receive the information. So the question of how is human rights, how are the human rights, and in particular the Article 19, is put in practice is critical, and we believe that the Universal Periodic Reporting Mechanism, the UPR, and we are just now in the middle of a UPR session, might be a good way. I mean, is a good way also to request accountability, and at the same time to recommend and to push member states into some directions. So we are engaging and we are working on these aspects related to enhance, I mean, on the way to enhance, let's say, UNESCO engagement in the human rights mechanism. So these are a few actions. Of course, we continue, for example, to publish some reports like the one which was published last week about the violence and the violence against the women journalists. And the report states that 3 out of 4 women journalists are victims of aggression, or different kind of aggression. And we see as a consequence of that quite a significant number of them feel really challenged and insecure, but also 30% of them really they accept to say that in a way the pressure on them has given or have created, let's say, the conditions for auto censorship, let's say, and it is something really bad. I mean, this is not a good news. This is not good news, because that means that those who are creating the pressure on journalists and specifically on women journalists, somehow they manage and they achieve some results, and this is not a good news at all.
No, indeed, indeed. I experienced that just sometimes commenting on something, that maybe has a more feminist slant. You have comments on your timeline on Twitter, from the very simple, like challenging everything you say, and to the more extreme, when women actually are investigative journalists that are actually seeking the truth and exposing maybe corruption. They will experience high levels of threat on the internet. So there is really an area that needs to be addressed. The platforms have a responsibility as well in terms of managing that.
And it is one specific, let's say, aspect of the hate speech. I mean, we know the hate speech is a huge debate, and we know that hate speech propagates and proliferates very, very well on the social media, and so we need to harness this issue of hate speech, and specifically more creating the conditions to protect women journalists in the activities. It is somehow a declination of the UN action plan for the safety of journalists.
You have been posted in Brazil for many years as the representative of UNESCO there. What lessons have you learned from the time you were there in terms of how Brazil is working with journalists, and what changes now in the current administration? What do you see the changes are?
I mean, what I can see in Brazil and in Latin America, more in general, I mean, it is the most dangerous region of the world for journalists. It is the region where we notice the highest number of crimes against journalists. And this is really very worrying. And we know, and I have seen that in Brazil, but it exists also in many other countries, especially in Latin America, where you've got local local reporters, for example, investigating on corruption or on different mechanisms by either businessmen or politicians, local politicians, and so on. They are at very high risk, and we see, unfortunately, we see regularly crimes. I mean, the assassination of these journalists, because it's easier to kill them than to listen. And yeah, and it is the easiest way, let's say, to get the story out of the news. And this is very 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 sad. And I mean, it's not specific to Brazil, but it is also something we see clearly. Out of 10 crimes against journalists, only 9 are investigated, are duly investigated. And so the impunity against journalists is, or impunity of the crimes against journalists are really worrying, and it is part of the problem. That's why, for example, UNESCO has been engaging over the last years to in working better, let's say, with the judges, and in particular, let's say, all the judiciary machinery, so that judges at a different level, but starting also with the Supreme Court, better understand the media laws, and better understand also what means press freedom, and yeah, and all the necessity, let's say, all the capacities for journalists to be able to speak, and to do their work. So what I have seen in Brazil is really a lot of violations of the rights against, let's say, journalists, and we need organization, and we need people who are strong enough to stand and to shout and to say that this is not acceptable. And I think it requires courage from organizations, from people, from institutions, to say that they need to protect. It is key to protect journalists and to let them do their work, because it is critical for democracy. It is critical for it is critical, let's say, for a society, let's say, to have a free and independent media and journalists able to do their work.
Thank you very much, Vincent Defourny, the Executive Director of UNESCO in Geneva.